All right, let's kick off this explainer with a number you absolutely need to remember: 60. When a pipe bursts in your home or your basement suddenly starts taking on water, you have exactly 60 minutes to start extracting that water before the structural damage and financial costs just begin to multiply exponentially. Listen, every single minute that water is allowed to sit, it's actively migrating into your drywall, it's seeping under your flooring, and it's working its way deep into your home's framing. The clock starts immediately.
So, welcome to our explainer. Today, we're diving into the high-stakes battle between nature and our living spaces. A battle, let's be honest, most of us really hope we never have to fight. To make this concrete, we're going to use the specific geographical and weather challenges of Dublin, Ohio as our case study. By looking at exactly how water restoration professionals handle emergencies in this very specific environment, we can uncover the universal science and the strategy behind saving literally any home from catastrophic water damage.
Here is our roadmap for today. First, we'll look at the Dublin water threat. Then, we'll move into the 48-hour mold countdown, explore the science of structural drying, break down mitigation versus restoration, and finally, talk about navigating insurance and costs. Let's get into it.
All right, starting with Section 1, the Dublin water threat, local risks.
Looking at a place like Dublin, Ohio gives us just a perfect microcosm of universal water threats. Take the winter, for example. The area experiences these brutal freeze-thaw cycles. This means pipes and unheated crawl spaces freeze solid, and then, when temperatures inevitably rise, they burst, pumping gallons of water per minute into a house. Then you have the heavy spring rains that can completely overload sump pumps in low-lying neighborhoods right near the Scioto River. And on top of all that, the area sits on clay-heavy soil. Now, clay holds water right up against foundations, creating this constant hydrostatic pressure that will absolutely find any tiny crack or weak point. Add in ice dams forming on steep roofs in the winter and maybe older corroding galvanized pipes in the historic districts, and you've got a perfect storm. It really is a great localized example of the defensive war our homes are fighting every single day.
Moving right along to Section 2, the 48-hour mold countdown, the ticking clock.
Now, before that 60-minute clock even really gets going, the professionals have to classify the threat level of the water itself. It's not all the same. Category 1 is a clean water supply leak. Think of a burst supply line or an overflowing bathtub. Category 2 is gray water. This would be something like a dishwasher leak or a toilet tank overflow. But Category 3, no way. That is black water. We're talking about sewage backups from aging city lines or natural river flooding. This level of contamination is highly, highly dangerous. It requires strict biohazard protocols and full hazmat gear just to walk in and begin the cleanup.
And this timeline right here brilliantly illustrates the terrifying urgency of the situation. Within the very first minute, water is already actively migrating into your porous drywall and insulation. Within 1 hour, that crucial emergency window for immediate extraction begins to close, and you start seeing deeper structural saturation. But the most critical threshold by far is that 24 to 48-hour mark. If heavy-duty commercial extraction and drying aren't well underway by then, toxic mold establishes a permanent foothold. This is especially true if you're dealing with high summer humidity, which turns wet drywall into an absolute breeding ground for mold colonies. And once that happens, I promise you, the complexity and the cost of the cleanup absolutely skyrocket.
Let's jump into Section 3, the science of structural drying. The science.
So, to actually stop that 48-hour timeline in its tracks, fixing a flooded house requires way more than just pointing a few box fans at a wet carpet. It requires rigorous, proven science. Restoration teams rely on a field called applied psychrometrics. Basically, this is the science of understanding exactly how air, temperature, and moisture interact with each other. Professionals use these principles to calibrate commercial drying equipment. They calculate exact air and moisture ratios to literally create a specific vapor pressure gradient. This essentially forces the water out of saturated materials, like your wood framing and drywall, and pulls it right into the air where huge industrial dehumidifiers can suck it away.
A really vital part of that science is a concept called grain depression. This is the calculated difference between the moisture in the indoor air versus the outdoor air. So why does this even matter? Well, imagine you're fighting a flood during a highly humid Ohio summer. A standard refrigerant dehumidifier is actually going to struggle to work because the outdoor air it's pulling from is already completely saturated. So technicians calculate this grain depression to mathematically determine if they need to bring in heavy-duty desiccant systems instead. These are massive machines that create extremely dry air regardless of how soupy and humid it is outside. This ensures the drying process doesn't stall out, because a stalled drying process means mold is going to grow.
Beyond categorizing the water's contamination level like we saw earlier, experts also have to categorize the physical spread of the water. So a Class 1 is just a partial room, maybe a surface spill with minimal absorption. A Class 3, on the other hand, involves overhead water, meaning saturated walls, ceilings, and subfloors that need advanced airflow to dry. And then you have Class 4. This is the most stubborn. We're talking deep saturation into low porosity materials, like concrete slabs or solid hardwood floors. By classifying the damage this way, professionals can build a very precise mathematical drying plan that dictates exactly how many air movers and specialty dehumidifiers are required for the job.
Okay, moving to Section 4, mitigation versus full restoration. Two vital phases.
Real, true recovery happens in a strict three-step sequence. First up, aggressive emergency water extraction. They bring in truck-mounted pumps to remove the standing water, and speed is absolutely everything here. Second is the controlled structural drying. And get this, they don't just guess where the water went. Technicians use thermal imaging cameras to find hidden moisture tracks inside your wall cavities, and then they set up precise airflow patterns based on that exact data. Third and finally is the verification and rebuild. Absolutely no reconstruction begins until daily moisture readings confirm that the structure meets very strict IICRC industry dry standards.
It is absolutely crucial to understand the distinction between these two phases. Water mitigation, that is your immediate emergency action. It's the triage phase. It's about extracting the water, setting up the drying equipment, and stopping the bleeding within that first 48 hours so you don't get mold. Water restoration, on the other hand, is the second phase. That's the long-term reconstruction, the final rebuild where they install new drywall, paint the walls, and lay down new flooring to return the property to exactly how it was before the loss. You definitely need both, but the mitigation must always come first, and it has to happen fast.
Finally, we reach Section 5, navigating insurance and costs. Navigating claims.
Let's talk about the money. When it comes to insurance, the golden rule, and really the difference between getting a check and getting a denial letter, revolves entirely around how the water got there. Most standard homeowner policies cover what's called sudden and accidental perils. Think of a frozen winter pipe bursting inside a wall, or a washing machine hose that suddenly snaps. However, they are going to firmly deny claims for excluded perils. This means gradual damage. So if you've got a poorly maintained roof that's been slowly leaking for 6 months, or natural groundwater seepage, or river flooding, that's generally excluded. River flooding, for instance, almost always requires a totally separate flood insurance policy.
So how do you actually survive the insurance maze and maximize your chances of a successful claim? First, you have to act instantly. Safely stop the water source to prevent secondary damage. Insurance actually expects you to mitigate the loss. Second, document absolutely everything. Take photos, take videos immediately, and report the event to your insurer within 24 hours. Keep every single receipt for any emergency mitigation work. And here is the real secret weapon. Utilize the professional thermal imaging and moisture mapping data provided by your mitigation team. Having that hard scientific proof is exactly what forces an insurance adjuster to acknowledge the true, hidden extent of the water damage.
As we wrap up this explainer today, I want to leave you with a rather serious question. When faced with high deductibles and the very real fear of your premiums going up, will you be tempted to just grab a shop vac, run a few box fans, and attempt a DIY cleanup? Keep in mind the science we've gone over today. Leaving hidden moisture trapped behind your baseboards to silently breed toxic mold and rot your home's foundation from the inside out, that is a catastrophic, exponentially multiplying price that literally no homeowner can afford to pay. So rely on the science, and whatever you do, act fast.